Monday afternoon. They'll resume in the morning, the city and the state preparing for the potential for violent demonstrations. Colonel Matt Langer of the Minnesota Highway Patrol says they're bringing in extra help from out of state.
We do have a contingent of law enforcement officers coming from the Ohio State Highway Patrol and the Nebraska State Patrol to be helping us as we secure critical infrastructure. And our hope is that we don't need them at all because it's about helping with some surge capacity, but it's also the realization that we need to plan for the absolute worst.
America is listening to Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
We buy a homeowner's policy and never give it another thought until something happens. Life brings changes, and our coverage needs can change. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Happy Day, this is Lieutenant Governor Josh Tenorio. Earth Month is a global movement, and it starts here at home. From Jigo to Inalahan and everywhere in between, cleanup projects, no matter the scale, help restore our island's beauty. Let's reconnect with our island and join us for the Guam Earth Month Island-wide Beautification Cleanup on Saturday, April 24th at 6 a.m. We all have a part in rebuilding a stronger, cleaner, greener Guam. Call 473-1162 for more details.
House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy says he will call on the House to censure California Congresswoman Maxine Waters for telling protesters in suburban Minneapolis over the weekend they must become more confrontational. McCarthy telling Fox News Primetime.
I think this takes action, especially when she has a pattern of this behavior. To have censure simply takes the majority of the House. But what could happen if this was to pass, because of the Democrats' rules, she would lose her chairmanship of the Financial Services.
But House Speaker Pelosi has said she does not think Representative Waters should be punished and shouldn't apologize for comments the Speaker says were made in the manner of the civil rights movement. The state of Florida has a tough new law against violent protests. Governor Ron DeSantis saying the anti-riot law means if you harm others, particularly a law enforcement officer in Florida, you're going to jail. Not guilty pleas Monday from the suspect in Kristen Smart's disappearance.
Paul Flores and his father Ruben were arrested last Tuesday. Paul Flores was charged with murdering Kristen Smart. She was last seen leaving a party and heading back to her dorm room at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo in 1996. While her body was never found, the district attorney says they had uncovered new evidence, including physical evidence, this year after investigators searched his father's property. He says Paul Flores was the last person to be seen with Kristen, and he alleges that Flores killed her during a rape or attempted rape. Ruben Flores has been charged with being an accessory after the fact to the crime of murder. A judge denied Paul Flores bail, and a hearing is set for Wednesday to determine if Ruben Flores can make bail. Jessica Rosenthal, Fox News.
Struggling to control rampant homelessness, Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti says he plans on spending nearly $1 billion in federal government stimulus money to get the homeless off the streets. Hockey has a new Iron Man. Patrick Marleau of the San Jose Sharks has played in his 1,768th NHL game, passing Gordie Howe for the most in league history. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
The vaccine is officially here, and we aren't just talking about the COVID vaccine, but a financial vaccine at Bank Pacific. We may not be doctors, but we can help you with your financial health. Whether to take advantage of today's crazy low rates, or just a local bank that has your back. At Bank Pacific, we want to help make 2021 your best year yet. Because for 66 years, where others put branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Equal housing lender, member FDIC.
Hafa, this is Josh here at APL. Our expertise and extensive network can help you grow your business and reach out to more global markets. As a responsible carrier, APL is also committed to a sustainable future, whether it's protecting the environment or investing our efforts in giving back to the community. Our dedicated teams in Guam, Saipan, and on U.S. mainland are here to support you. Call 588-4651 or visit www.apl.com.
Hafa Day. Patsy Gogri from Security Title with a real estate tip. A power of attorney can be a useful tool when a buyer or seller cannot be present to sign documents, such as a military member deployed overseas. To mitigate its fraudulent use, your escrow officer will contact the seller to make sure they know their property is being sold. When using a power of attorney, call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services. Sunday brunch at Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro is back. Come and enjoy Mezcla's true taste of Guam. Open for 2 seatings at 10:30 a.m. and 12:30 p.m. $28.95 for adults and $14.95 for kids 5 to 11 years old. Call 479-2652 or 2653 for reservations.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Starting another episode of Tall Tales, the greatest afternoon talk show in the Western Pacific, by my own admission.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Starting right out with Zemi Ikotny. And here we go again with the Daily News. The Daily News is writing local editorials again. I drove past the Daily News office downtown, and I noticed as you come to the front door, there's a large sign that says, "No right turn." And you proceed a little bit further, and it says, "Keep to your left."
Yikes.
And that seems to be their editorial policy, pretending maybe that they're driving down a street in Oz or something like that, keeping to the left instead of to the right. The title of today's editorial, "Styrofoam Ban is Important." It really kind of tells you everything you need to know, doesn't it? Bill 69 is a good step for our environment. Future. We need to be good ancestors.
What? We're still alive.
We need to be good ancestors. And I want it to be said, 2 generations hence, after I've gone to meet my maker, I'd like to have those grandchildren say, my grandpa was a good man. He was all in favor of banning styrofoam packages. In my mind, my grandpa is a hero. He just said no to styrofoam. Yeah. The greatest generation. I was actually, I guess, a part of the greatest generation, born before World War II. Too young to fight in World War II, obviously. Too young for Korea, I guess too old for Vietnam. But we used to think of those, mature adults that made it through World War II as the greatest generation, only to be replaced by the anti-styrofoam generation. What a group of heroes. So here we go again. Styrofoam ban is important. Bill 69 is a good step for our environment. Future. We need to be good ancestors. We banned plastic bags, and although we are in a phase of being inconvenienced, it's good for our environment and future. Banning styrofoam or polystyrene foam is a natural next step. Styrofoam promised to do even more damage to our environment and our community than plastic bags ever could. I know mothers, when their children used to go outside at night, back in the days when children used to go outside, instead of sitting around and playing with their phones, their mothers would say, "Be careful of plastic bags out there." Yeah.
I remember that too.
Yeah. Styrofoam promises to do even more damage to our environment and our community than plastic bags ever could. Styrofoam takes hundreds of years to break down, and there is argument on whether it actually breaks down or just breaks into little pieces and remains in the environment. Styrofoam also releases chemicals into our environment, especially if it's incinerated. Much like plastic bags, Styrofoam has become a part of our lives. We are a plate lunch society, and most plate lunches come in Styrofoam containers. Although many coffee shops have switched from Styrofoam cups, there still are many that haven't. Let's go around and identify them and paint big X's on the front windows, you know, a little crystal knocked here for those that are still using Styrofoam cups. Bill 69, introduced to the Guam legislature by the Guam Youth Congress.
That's who I think wrote this op-ed.
Uh-huh. That's where we look for leadership. The Guam Youth Congress. As a matter of fact, I heard that when this bill was introduced into the Guam Youth Congress and word got to Sweden that we were still using Styrofoam cups here, that Greta Thunberg said,
"How dare they?
How dare they?" The bill gives the community 2 years to phase out Styrofoam containers, banning vendors from selling the products and business entities from using the products to serve prepared food. Boy, we're getting tough here now. Forget about, child trafficking and smuggling and narcotics and money laundering, etc. Styrofoam is where it's at. The bill requires the Guam Environmental Protection Agency to conduct educational outreach as well as enforcement of the law. I can see it all now. Uniformed officers with large badges shaped like Styrofoam cups out patrolling the streets with search warrants, searching out Styrofoam cups. Per the bill, vendors and businesses can use very specific disposable containers in their course of business. The containers have to be either plant-based. How about wood? I think if they were made out of wood, maybe we could go out and start chopping down trees and making plates and cups out of wood. The environmental wackos would love that. Or meet specific criteria related to their biodegradable properties. The bill is constructed to give businesses time to use their Styrofoam inventory. I have a feeling, what we ought to do, we ought to install some in the Guam Museum, part of our heritage. So, 60 or 70 years from now, parents can take their children to the museum and say, these are Styrofoam cups. These are things we used to do back in the bad old days.
Look at these good ancestors.
Yeah, here's a picture of our ancestors who did away with this. Many businesses on Island have already made the switch, either because they know it's good for the environment or because they know at some point the materials will be banned. Many local consumers have made the choice to patronize businesses that subscribe to sustainable practices. Wow. This is a trend nationwide that will continue.
So why do we need a bill?
Exactly. Guam is the forefront of this movement to ban Styrofoam. Maine was the first state to implement a statewide ban of Styrofoam, which went into effect in January. Maryland also passed legislation to ban Styrofoam last week. Statewide bans also have been proposed in New York, Virginia, and Colorado. 13 cities in 13 states have passed citywide bans of styrofoam. Like many islands, the land, the ocean, and our people are our best resources. We must do what we need to protect our resources and to be good ancestors for our children. It's not a surprise that the bill comes from your youth Congress. It's not a surprise at all, as a matter of fact. This is their home to protect. It's their right to construct a future in which they can thrive. Styrofoam ban is important. Bill 69 is a good step for our environment and future. We need to be good ancestors. We could just get those words, those sentences translated into Latin and put them on a crest. Words we can live by. Well, I'm going to support this for a reason that would probably never dawn on them. I don't like to drink coffee out of a styrofoam cup. A paper cup, yeah. Paper cup is much better than a styrofoam cup. I was really disappointed because, it used to be, when we first saw styrofoam cups, we'd say, man, that's a funny looking paper cup. Because a paper cup was like cellophane, it wasn't even a trade name. It was a generic term. So I'll be glad when we do away with styrofoam cups, not because I want to take the effort to pander to the Youth Congress. In fact, I'm not going to pander to the Youth Congress. I'll tell you, in the 28th Guam legislature, we came close to abolishing the Youth Congress, something I would have been completely in favor of. I don't see that there's anything beneficial about the Youth Congress, this being a classic example. And I wonder if instead of having the editorial board write this, they got somebody from the Youth Congress to write it. It kind of has those earmarks, doesn't it?
Sounds just like them. I don't mind the Youth Congress, but why do we have to put them in such a pedestal? It should be a place for the kids to practice, not to preach.
Well, do we want to train kids to be senators? Is that what we want to train?
Well, as far as process, but not but I guess you're right. The mentality happens to seep in.
Yeah, and I think it's finally beginning to subside, but I think there, 25 years ago, maybe even less, more recently than that, the mark of success was to be a senator. Hey, your kid's pretty smart. Maybe he could be a senator. Maybe they could be a senator. Instead of, maybe they could go into business for themselves like so many successful business people have. So, I just don't see that there's anything to learn, anything for a kid to learn. And if you want to learn how the legislature works, I'll give you a book. That's how you can learn. Except maybe the bad habits that are endemic in that body. Okay, well, keep trying, Daily News. You're stepping up to the plate, and you're swinging for the fences, but you're striking out an awful lot here. Maybe concentrate on singles and doubles for a while until you get the hang of it again. Yeah, maybe you'll get started after all. Okay, the Post doesn't exactly set the world on fire today either. Rev Tax's recent efforts worth recognition. There continues to be a bottleneck of cars on Monday mornings waiting to take a turn to the Department of Rev Tax. That can be expected based on the habits of some of our fellow Guamanians whose to-do lists at the beginning of the week or first Monday of the month, including going to Rev Tax for a myriad of errands from tax filing to vehicle registering to renewing a business license to following up on a tax return. But as the midweek and weekend approach, the line actually gets shorter at Rev Tax, And if you time it right, there are times of the day when you can just walk in and there's hardly any line. This is such a welcome change from the days when customers would need to wake up before dawn just to be first in line at Rev Tax. Somehow the lines have eased, and somehow the process has gotten better. One of the things the pandemic prompted Rev Tax under Director Daphne Matsipit-Shimizu is to hasten the digitization of some of the services at Rev Tax. You know, if I'm not wrong, 15 or 20 years ago, we were renewing our license tags online, weren't we, Jose? You get
How many years ago?
15 or 20.
Oh.
You get a notice in the mail, and you'd fill out something online, and use your credit card to pay, and as if by magic, that little tag would come in the mail in about a week.
Was it still stapled to the?
It was stapled.
Right in the middle.
Yeah, it's stapled to the actually to your registration document. Yeah, so Daphne hired this guy to work for her named what was it? Michael J. Fox, I think.
Again, I shouldn't drink when you say these things.
Yeah. So she said, Michael J. Fox, what can we do to get this stuff online? And he said, well, there's a friend of mine has a DeLorean outside. We'll just go back to the future. Yeah, see how that works, right? Take registering a vehicle. For example, doing it online can be quick and easy if you have three things that are needed. Now, once again, this is a news story masquerading as an editorial. RevTax recently speedily processed more than 74,000 economic impact payments without delay. And GovGuam's usual snail pace with processing paperwork, the completion and processing of 74,500 tax returns or other documents for the payment is remarkable, maybe even a GovGuam miracle. We have called out RevTax when its processes were unreasonably slow. We should also give them credit when it's due. Thank you, RevTax. Now, if RevTax could only shorten the months-long wait for the new driver's license, I hear what they're saying. But, you know, we're so far behind the rest of the country, if not the rest of the world, as to how we transact business. So what Daphne Matsipit-Shimizu is doing here, she's doing her job. That's why she's there. That's why she's paid the big bucks. There shouldn't be anything remarkable or noteworthy about doing your job. Mediocrity in government service ought to be more than satisfactory. Just hitting the median ought to be more than satisfactory. And of course, we expect a good job. And when we get, you know, what we're paying for, it's not some kind of a miracle. It's the way things ought to be. You younger folks certainly wouldn't remember this, but there was a time when we had an administration building downtown. That building was torn down about 6 or 7 years ago and turned into two large flat spaces of concrete that I suppose will be there forever. But the way that the government worked in those days, the first floor every department had space on the first floor, and it had a window. It had one of those shutters that roll up and roll down. So when you wanted to do business with the government of Guam, you went to one of those windows and you stood there and you did it. So, you know, we outgrew that building, but we haven't outgrown that mentality that if you want to do something with the government of Guam, well, you got to go over there and you got to get the paper and sign it and take that paper somewhere else. And it's time that we put everything online. It's time that we should be able to do our taxes online and all of the things that we need to do. And it's time that we could pay for those with a credit card. Now, you can pay for government services with a credit card now, but there's a pretty substantial service fee that goes with it. I don't pretend to be an expert on credit cards. I got to just tell you one personal experience. One time when we were traveling, my wife lost her credit card, and, I didn't turn it in right away. So after about 6 weeks, I found out the thief was only spending about $100 a week. So I decided it's cheaper not to turn it in.
It's like you tell your wife to drop all her credit cards.
Yeah, so it's just, it's a cost-benefit analysis, right? Just kidding, of course. So, but my expertise in credit cards depends primarily on using them. And I don't pay for anything with cash that I can pay for with a credit card. And it's such a convenience compared to the way we used to do things. So the government has to charge that service fee, and I'm told, or we are all told, that that's the way it is when you deal with credit cards. Now, a lot of places, a lot of governments, in fact, just about any other government I've ever had to deal with doesn't do that. And my feeble amount of knowledge on credit cards suggests that given the size of the government of Guam and the value of the transactions that the government of Guam would do, it would be possible to cut a deal with credit card companies so that we wouldn't have to pass that service fee on to the customer. The Waterworks doesn't do it. The Power Authority doesn't do it. It just seems to me that that's something that Governor Leon Guerrero ought to know a little bit about credit cards. It seems like that's something we could do that would make everyone's life just a little bit easier.
Apparently they're able to do it right now because I paid with a credit card recently at Reventax, and they said you can do it because we waived the fees. I was kind of reluctant.
This was a pandemic accommodation, yeah. So let's hope that they make it permanent. Okay, I'm going to go to the card here. If I don't have someone in the green room that wants to get on and talk about credit card. R. Carl and credit cards? That seems a little out of character for R. Carl. Tell me about credit cards, R. Carl.
Oh, hey, Bob. Good afternoon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had an experience that I'd like to share with you and your audience. Reventax, and I'm glad they are accepting credit cards. I mean, that's good. But they've got this archaic procedure of adding in a certain percentage, and they do it manually. So I went there and I paid some fee that was due at a certain point. This was like a couple of months ago. And then I was reviewing my credit card statement recently, like a couple of weeks ago, and this percentage, I think it's like 2.5%, 3% or whatever.
Carl, were you listening? That's the service fee.
Yeah. Well, what happened is they manually punched this in. It's supposed to be like $3.59. They charged me like $35.90. So I've got to print out the page. I've got to go back. I've got to stand in line, and I've got to get this thing corrected. So it's really an archaic way of doing things. I don't know what they can do, but I can't imagine I'm the only one that has had this happen to them. Because I'm pretty sure it's got to be manually done for such a mistake to happen.
I have an idea what happened.
Clue me in.
They recognized you as the most dangerous man in the room. And this was sort of a subterfuge to catch you off guard, R. Carl.
Well, it worked. They did catch me off guard.
Uh-huh. And that's the price you pay for being the most dangerous man in the room.
Yeah, it's a burden I have to bear. Yeah. And by the way, you were talking about PDN, and I'm pretty sure this is accurate. If you stand in front of the legislature and you stare at that PDN building, I would bet anything, because I looked at it, it leans to the left, and I'm serious.
It's almost like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, leaning
Yes.
to the left, right? Yeah.
The Leaning Tower of Leftism, or PDN, or whatever. We got to come up with a name for that. We got to come up with a tag for them, because it's definitely leaning to the left.
All right. Well, thanks for your help on the credit cards, R. Carl. I gotta go for a short break here. Thanks for calling.
Okay, Bob.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
76 Circle K, the Subaki Tower, and Spa Ayalam bring you another staycation. We are celebrating Mom and all she does. Win a 2-night stay at the luxurious Subaki Tower, get pampered by Spa Ayalam, and enjoy a delicious lunch and dinner at Casa Oceano. All you have to do is purchase $35 or more in 76 fuel and enter to win a staycation fit for a mom. The more you gas, the more chances of winning. Visit 76circlekguam.com or any Circle K location for more information.
We now return to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, soaring over the confusion with his superpowers of truth. Call 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Well, here we go. I was peeking at Facebook here, and Nate horned in and says, so the Youth Congress has proposed the plastic paper bag ban, which passed. Now they're banning styrofoam. And then he says, what has the adult Congress passed? Asking for a voter. But I'm going to quibble with you a little bit, Nate. You said, what has the adult Congress passed? I know we've got a youth Congress, but I'm not aware of the adult Congress. I suppose it's out there somewhere, but I'm not familiar with their work. All right, so let's go back. Let's pick up the card here. See what we've got on the card for today. Yes, of course, we start out with Steve. And today, Steve carried on doing that which he does best. Nothing. And let's see, after that, then we had, we still got more Hattick-gate. And Julian Uggan has developed some pen pals, and Protehe talked to the governor. Protehe Latexan talked to the governor based on Julian Uggan's correspondence with his pen pals. And let's see, there's one other thing that I've got on the calendar here today.
Yeah, something with Maxine Waters.
Yeah. Where in the heck is it? Yeah, well, I'll just ad-lib it. Auntie Max is working hard for the defense in the Chauvin case. Appears that Auntie Max would like to see Chauvin get a mistrial, or at least a good issue on appeal. So why don't we start out with that? Why don't we just start out with Auntie Max? We can put Steve aside. And here's the Auntie Max story. This comes from a wire service called the dailywire.com. A good email service. Judge Peter Cahill, who was presiding over the case involving the death of George Floyd, said on Monday that remarks made by Representative Maxine Waters over the weekend could lead to the whole trial being overturned on appeal. And it's so pervasive that it is, I just don't know how this jury, it can really be said to be that they are free from the taint of this, the lawyer representing Derek Chauvin said. And now that we have U.S. representatives threatening acts of violence in relation to the specific case, it's mind-boggling to me, Judge. I'm aware that, and the judge says, I'm aware that Congressman Waters was talking specifically about this trial and about the unacceptability of anything less than a murder conviction and a talk about being confrontational, Cahill said. But you can submit the press articles about that. This goes back to what I've been saying from the beginning. But Judge Cahill just doesn't have a good enough command of the English language to express this properly, Jose. He said, this is what I've been saying from the beginning. What he should have said is, this goes back to what I've been saying from the get-go. I wish elected officials would stop talking about this case, especially in a manner that is disrespectful to the rule of law and to the judicial branch and our function. I think if they want to give their opinions, they should do so in a respectful in a manner that is consistent with their oath to the Constitution to respect a co-equal branch of government. Their failure to do so, I think, is abhorrent. But I don't think it prejudices with additional material. It would prejudice history. They have been told not to watch the news. He's talking about the jurors. I trust they're following those instructions and that there is not in any way prejudice to the defendant beyond the articles. We're talking specifically about the facts of this case. A congresswoman's opinion really doesn't matter a whole lot. Anyway, motion for mistrial is denied. And then he said, well, I'll give you that Congressman Waters may have given you something on appeal that may result in this whole trial being overturned. Now, this takes me back to the several different theories of trials that I mentioned last week. And we start out with trial by optics. What does it look like? Well, I saw this film of a policeman with his neck on George Floyd's neck, and George Floyd was black and the policeman was white, so I think they killed George Floyd. I think that's murder. And then there's a trial by critical race theory, which is very similar. Critical race theory says someone died at the hands of a policeman. The policeman was white. The person that died was black. We don't need to know what happened. All we have to do is identify who was the oppressor and who was the oppressed. The oppressor was the police officer because he was white. The person who was oppressed was obviously George Floyd, the oppressed. Therefore, Cahill is guilty of murder. That's trial according to critical race theory, anti-racism, it's also called. And then there's trial by social justice, and that is that when you have a trial that meets the criteria of critical race theory, if the result doesn't come out right, or sometimes even if the beginning doesn't come out right, if the case is not charged properly, then the remedy is to go out and set the town on fire. This is
always.
Yes, this is trial by social justice. Now, a funny thing happened, as I've been watching trials. One of the most famous trials of all time was the trial California versus O.J. Simpson, where O.J. Simpson killed his wife, Nicole, and a poor guy named Ronald Goldberg or
Goldstein?
Yeah, Gold something or other. Yeah, I think it was Goldstein, who just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Nicole had left something in a restaurant. The guy worked there. He brought it back to her house when O.J. O.J. came home. And my mental image of it was kind of like if you ever saw the movie The Shining, when Jack Nicholson broke through the door with an axe and said, "I'm home, dear." because Ron Goldstein and Nicole were obviously murdered. There wasn't any question about manslaughter or something like that. O.J. took off in his car with somebody else, drove around for a few hours. They were finally able to pull him in, etc. He went to trial, and he was found guilty. I'm sorry, he was found innocent.
Yeah.
Except everybody in the whole world, except 12 people on the jury, knew he was guilty. Goldstein's parents sued him, and in a civil case, a damage award in the millions of dollars was awarded against O.J. because it was pretty clear what happened.
Goldman, I think.
Ron Goldman. There you go, yeah. So, after that verdict came in, the town people were rioting and looting and starting. No, nothing at all happened. Not one thing. So I guess the Goldmans and the people related to Nicole Simpson didn't understand the social justice theory of justice, right? And then finally, there are four different, I talked about four different kinds of justice. Then there's kind of the one that we've had in place here for about 1,000 years, where we set up a procedure called the judicial branch. We have courts and judges, and it's very heavily rule-bound. It's very formalistic, and it's designed to give every possible break to the defendant, such that in order for a defendant in a criminal case to be found guilty, every single one of the 12 jurors must be convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant in that case did what he was accused of doing in the absence of excuse or defense. And if that isn't the case, there can be no guilty finding. And there are privileges against self-incrimination. The defendant in a criminal case is entitled to a jury trial, and the juror must have a racial balance that is consistent with the defendant's race, according to Batson versus Kentucky. And every possible thing is set up to make that trial fair. So then we have a trial going on here for George Floyd, where a police officer named Chauvin and a couple other cops are accused of killing him, for want of a better term. But that's not good enough for the race hustlers like Auntie Maxine, who lives in a multi-million-dollar mansion outside of her own district. She does not live in her district.
No kidding.
Yeah, she has a residence in her district, but that's not where she lives. So the race hustlers like Auntie Max and Ben Crump, et cetera, and in order to make their shtick really work, they've got to go around inflaming the public. So Auntie Max left California and came to Minneapolis and goes on a TV show and says, if we don't get the right verdict, stay in the streets, be militant, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Things that were far more inflammatory than the things that Donald Trump said on December 6th. But, of course, we all know there's a difference between Auntie Max and Donald Trump. So, as he should, Chauvin's lawyer moves for a mistrial. He's saying, what happened when you have a member of Congress come to town and say something like that? And, of course, the message is to the jurors, if you don't find this guy guilty, they're going to be back in the streets, looting, arson, the whole thing. So he makes a motion for a mistrial, and just said, no, I'm not going to grant your mistrial, but you got a real good argument for appeal. Talking about appeals takes me back to what I talked about early on, and that is that what I think may very well be a reversible issue is the judge's denial of a motion to change venue. I don't see how you could possibly pick a jury that passes the impartiality test in Minneapolis, in Hennepin County, because this has been so highly publicized. Before jury selection was even over, the city of Minneapolis settled with the Floyd family for over $20 million. Now, the jurors know this, and of course, your common sense tells you, well, if the city gave them all that money, they obviously know that they were wrong. Not so at all. Those settlements are political decisions, not legal decisions. So my sense is that by not moving the case out of Hennepin County, out to some little town way out in the sticks, the judge committed reversible error. On the same subject, I want to mention a couple of really interesting changes of venue for that same reason. There was a gentleman named Arthur Flegenheimer back in the 30s who was in the whiskey business.
His name is my name, too?
Yeah. He was in the whiskey business, but instead of having stores, he carried his whiskey around in his boots, and he sold it from his boots.
Uh-huh.
So Arthur Flegenheimer wasn't a very good, glamorous name for a bootlegger during Prohibition, so he somehow was stuck with the name Dutch Schultz. And when Dutch Schultz was busted in New York, he moved for change of venue. He was given a change of venue to a small town in upstate New York. He spent several $1,000s being a really nice guy in that town, and guess what? He was acquitted. The strangest, and then back to O.J. Simpson, the judge in that case, sua sponte, changed venue, or maybe it was on the motion of the prosecution, because instead of trying it out in Brentwood Hills or wherever it was, and a real silk stocking part of the L.A. suburbs, they moved it downtown. And the explanation was from the district attorney was, well, you know, if we don't, the black population is going to say, yeah, you just took him out there to that white neighborhood so you could lynch him. So we got to try it in a different part of town. And of course they lost. The most interesting change of venue that I'm aware of dealt with a guy named Bernie, who was a funeral director in a town called Carthage, Texas. And a movie was made about this case. Bernie was a very charming, relatively young man, say in his early 30s, who was in the funeral business. And the lady in her late 70s really took a shine to Bernie. And they got married. She was a cougar. And Bernie lived pretty high off the hog for quite some time. And then people started wondering, gosh, we haven't seen so-and-so for a long time. Bernie always had good excuses as to why she wasn't with him, till finally the cops got a search warrant and found out that she was on ice. Bernie had killed her and put her in the deep freeze.
Yikes.
Yeah, but he continued to sign checks and her on and on and on and on. So when the case came to trial in Carthage, Texas, the prosecution moved for a change of venue because Bernie was so well-liked in Carthage, Texas, and the woman not so much, that the prosecution was afraid that the prejudice would all go against him. So he moved for a change of venue out of Carthage, Texas, which was granted, and Bernie was convicted. So it was Jack Black played Bernie, so needless to say, it was played for a few laughs.
Oh.
But it was a really funny, really good movie.
Was this wasn't the Polka King, was it? No.
Polka Game?
Polka King?
No.
Okay.
I can't remember the name of it.
He did a similar movie that sounded like that.
Yeah.
He scammed.
Yeah. Okay, so much for Auntie Max and Chauvin. So Auntie Max, shooting her mouth off may very well have given Chauvin grounds for a reversal, for a mistrial, whatever, on appeal, because, she knows what she's supposed to do. She understands critical race theory, and she understands the social justice theory of justice. So what do you expect her to do? Just stay home, shut up, and watch TV? She can't do that. Okay, so we got a break coming up here. I've got Ray on the line. He wants to talk about credit cards. So since I'm finished here with Anti-Max, I will allow it. Where's my gavel? I will allow it. Short break.
Half a day, this is Lieutenant Governor Josh Tenorio. You have an opportunity to make a difference, and it starts here at home. Cleanup projects, no matter the scale, help restore our island's beauty. Governor Liu and I invite our community to join us for the Guam Earth Month Island-wide Beautification Cleanup on Saturday, April 24th at 6 a.m. We all have a part in rebuilding a stronger, cleaner, greener Guam. Call 473-1162 for more details.
Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Tumon is back with all your mezcla favorites, like oxtail kadu, Kahlua pig and cabbage, and Chef Peter's style black stew frittata. Mezcla is ready to welcome back everyone with great service in a safe and friendly environment. Come on down and visit Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Tumon, located on the first floor lobby of the Grand Plaza Hotel. Open for lunch from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. and for dinner from 5:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. Call 969-2652 for reservations. Mezcla, a true taste of Guam.
Yeah, well, this reminds me, back home again in Indiana. It kind of reminds me of some of my travels, we'll see. Pretty lucky. I've been to some pretty exotic places. I've been to Indonesia. I've been to India. And I've even been to Indiana. Talk about exotic. Yeah. Okay, so I got Ray on the line here. This is not our Ray. This is another Ray, right?
Another Ray.
Okay. Good afternoon, Ray.
Hello, Bob. Thanks for taking my call. I'm calling in reference. I didn't get all your conversation about if you pay Treasurer Guam with your credit card. I've done that, and I've seen where they've charged me more than what the service fee actually is. But as a merchant, isn't the service fee a tax write-off?
Well, I'm not your tax attorney, nor your lawyer, but it certainly sounds like a cost of doing business. For you, right?
Yeah, because if I'm a merchant, then I have a bank service fee. That's a business cost. It's 100% tax write-off. So does those same, is Gov Guam that way, or are they not? I don't understand the tax structure for Gov Guam. I mean, are they okay to charge us that, or are they just kind of, sliding it under the table to us?
Well, my analysis was when I was into this one, Ray, I said that not being an expert on credit cards, but knowing that the volume of the business that the merchant does has a bearing on the credit card fees that the credit card company will charge, I thought given the size of transactions that the government of Guam does, if they were good negotiators, they could negotiate with credit card companies not to charge the government of Guam a fee for handling those transactions, and therefore there wouldn't be any service fee to pass along to the citizens of Guam. And I've heard, or it's been said by government officials, well, we can't get the credit card companies to do that. It just doesn't sound right to me. It doesn't square with my everyday experience, Ray.
Well, okay, I understand that. It didn't answer the question. I can talk to a CPA about it, but does Gov Guam pay the taxes like the rest of us, or are they exempt?
Oh, of course not. Of course not. Government agencies don't pay taxes. Whatever revenue comes into the government of Guam is whether it comes as tax revenue or If the government still ran the utilities, which it did up until 2001, the money that you paid for your power bill and water bill was just government revenue and not taxable.
Mm-hmm.
Does that answer your question?
Somewhat, yeah. I did put a little more light onto it because I noticed I don't blame them for passing on these service fees if they don't get a tax break on it, like a regular commercial merchant would. But on the other hand, for commercial merchants to tack on the service fee to their bill, I don't think they should do that because it's a tax write-off at the end of the year. So how can they charge for something that they're just going to get reimbursed off their taxes?
Well, I don't know what the law is now, but there was a time when it was not legal. If you paid with a credit card, you could only be charged the amount that you actually owed the merchant without any add-ons. And I suspect that that's still the law.
Yes, yeah, because any merchants that tack that onto me, if I can't get them to reverse it, they no longer get my business.
And I would have thought that the government of Guam might have taken that hard-nosed approach itself. And, it might be that one credit card issuer would do it and the other one wouldn't. But given the size of the transactions, it would have made it worthwhile for a company to waive those fees.
Yeah. Well, if you're a commercial company, then they are a tax write-off at the end of the year if you keep your books straight. But Bob, thank you for your time. I appreciate your input on things.
It's always good to talk to a tailgater, Ray. Thanks for calling.
You have a good day. Bye-bye.
Okay, so let's see. I got just a couple more minutes before the big halftime show here. Next on the card is Hattick Gate. But let me just spend a little time on Facebook here till the end of the first half. Sandra Regis is here. Colin Clark is here. Lynn McAfee. Henry Manglona, all the way from Barstow, California, the garden spot of the Southwest. Right, Henry? Denise Legaspi, also known as Lady D, who I haven't seen around for a while. Welcome back, Lady D. Good to see you here. And then Oli Gim, somebody I haven't seen before. And as I mentioned, Nate horned in earlier. Pam Duvall, one of our regulars, is here. Nate Horn says companies will have to bear the scarlet litter if they still use styrofoam. I don't know if that would be a third-degree felony or a second-degree felony. Possession with intent to distribute styrofoam. That could be pretty serious crime. All right, well, let's break for the big halftime show.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Bracing for the verdict. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. As the jury deliberates the fate of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin in George Floyd's death, the city is bracing for public reaction to whatever the verdict is.
Minnesota Governor Tim Walz says there is no verdict, so there is no need for a curfew just yet.
What we do is, and I think we assess multiple times a day.
But he was joined by the mayors of the Twin Cities, saying what cannot happen is the destruction of businesses and livelihoods. St. Paul Mayor Melvin Carter said the deaths of George Floyd and Daunte Wright spark outrage. He says one change will end that.
We can best stop protests over police killings of unarmed black men by stopping police killings of unarmed black men.
Governor Walz says Minnesota will be shaped by how it responds to the verdict.
Fox's Gernal Scott. Judge Peter Cahill ordered the jury sequestered until they reach a verdict. He again refused a defense motion for a mistrial. It wasn't a fire extinguisher or bear spray that killed Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick, who died following the Capitol building riot in January. Washington's medical examiner now says his death was from natural causes. Officer Sicknick suffered a stroke. Former President Trump highly critical of his successor in his first on-camera interview since leaving office, telling Fox's Hannity President Biden has mishandled the problem of migrants crossing the southern border.
They're sending us people that in many cases, not in all cases, are murderers, drug dealers, human traffickers, really bad rapists.
Mr. Trump also saying Republicans can return to power if they unify the party. Tributes are pouring in for former Vice President Walter Mondale. President Biden says he lived to play by the rules and love his country. Former President Jimmy Carter calling his running mate the best vice president ever. At his home in Minneapolis, Walter Mondale is dead at 93. America is listening to Fox News.
The vaccine is officially here, and we aren't just talking about the COVID vaccine, but a financial vaccine at Bank Pacific. We may not be doctors, but we can help you with your financial health. Whether to take advantage of today's crazy low rates, or just a local bank that has your back. At Bank Pacific, we want to help make 2021 your best year yet. Because for 66 years, where others put branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Equal housing lender, member FDIC.
Half a day. Patsy Gogri from Security Title with a real estate tip. A power of attorney can be a useful tool when a buyer or seller cannot be present to sign documents, such as a military member deployed overseas. To mitigate its fraudulent use, your escrow officer will contact the seller to make sure they know their property is being sold. When using a power of attorney, call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
A third investigation of New York's Governor Andrew Cuomo is getting underway. This one over the book he wrote about the way he'd handled the coronavirus outbreak.
In a new letter, New York Comptroller Thomas DiNapoli, a Democrat, authorized New York's Attorney General Letitia James to launch a criminal investigation into whether Governor Cuomo misused state resources to write his COVID-19 pandemic memoir on leadership entitled American Crisis. DiNapoli giving the AG authority to investigate any indictable offense involving but not limited to in the drafting, editing, sale, and promotion of the governor's book and any related financial or business transactions. Cuomo is accused of violating state ethics law by having his aides print and edit passages of his book. Cuomo reportedly made at least $4 million on the book deal, a number he won't confirm yet.
Fox's Brian Yennis reports the governor is already being investigated for the way the state reported coronavirus nursing home deaths early in the pandemic and allegations of sexual misconduct. Federal safety investigators looking into the fatal crash of an apparently driverless Tesla over the weekend.
Federal regulators are sending investigators to Spring, Texas to look into Saturday's deadly crash of a Tesla. Police say no one was driving the Tesla, which hit a tree and burst into flames. One man's body was found in the back seat. Another was in the passenger seat. Now the feds want to know, was Tesla's autopilot partially automated system in use? Autopilot can keep a car in its lane and even change lanes. Tesla CEO Elon Musk sent out a tweet saying logs from the car show autopilot was not on. That feature's been criticized, with some saying the company's been overselling its abilities. Jill Nato, Fox News.
Wall Street lower Monday, the Dow losing 123 points, NASDAQ down 137. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
We buy a homeowner's policy and never give it another thought until something happens. Life brings changes, and our coverage needs can change. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Tumon is back with all your mezcla favorites, like oxtail kadu, Kahlua pig and cabbage, and Chef Peter's-style black stew frittata. Mezcla is ready to welcome back everyone with great service in a safe and friendly environment. Come on down and visit Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Tumon, located on the first floor lobby of the Grand Plaza Hotel. Open for lunch from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. and for dinner from 5:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. Call 969-2652 for reservations. Mezcla, a true taste of Guam.
Hafaday, this is Congressman Nicholas. If you are a small business, you may be interested in a federal program called the State Small Business Credit Initiative. This program can provide federal funds to match equity investments into your company or help you get lower interest rates at local banks. To find out more on how this program can help your small business, please contact your Guam Congressional Office at 475-6453 or at michael.sannicolas@mail.house.gov.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the Office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
Listen to The Point. Any speaker, anytime. Check us out on your FM radio at 93.3, 104.3 HD3, thepoint.gu, Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and tune in. And announcing radio.com. Download the app and hear The Point. Get the latest news, sports, entertainment, and more. On demand. Your phone is digital. Your life is digital. And we are too. 93.3, The Point.
So another big halftime show here on Tall Tales we all like so much. Means we're in the second half of Tall Tales, and I start out the second half of Tall Tales with more Hattick Gate. And something really important came out of this episode of Hattick Gate. I'll start out with a story that ran in... let's see here. Well, let me start out here with the Post story, the Post article. Oh, here, I found it. This is from yesterday, and it's a story that ran on PNC News. Governor meeting with CLTC to decide Hattick's fate. Now, Hattick is lucky because apparently he hasn't publicly contradicted anything that the governor said. So he may when he meets with her, he may very well not be greeted with the governor's typical "off with his head." So this is a story that ran actually last night on PNC. Governor Leon Guerrero is meeting with Chamorro Land Trust Commission to decide the fate of CLTC Administrative Director Jack Hattick III. The CLTC had called for a meeting with the governor after deciding last week that Hattick was, quote, not suited as administrative director of the CLTC. Hattick is staying on as administrative director until the CLTC meets with the governor and a decision is made one way or another whether Hattick will stay on or whether a replacement will be named. No decisions have been made, and I'm meeting with the chair this afternoon, Leanne Guerrero said during a news conference after the Earth Month virtual signing proclamation. Earlier, the governor expressed confidence in Hattick, saying, quote, I am confident that Jack did not intentionally mean anything contrary to the law and regulations of the commission.
She was serious.
Yeah, I guess she's the only one that felt that way, because even the chairman didn't feel that way. And even the commission doesn't feel that way. Now, here's the momentous thing that comes out of this particular article. Now, I've told you about great pronouncements before, and I'm keeping track of them. We had attorney Vanessa Williams, who is very pro-abortion, and Vanessa Williams said, it's impossible to separate our choice of whether and when to have children from every other choice in our lives. You know, having a child, getting a car wash, going to the movies, many, many choices.
Washing your hair.
And then we had Chief Steve Ignacio at the very beginning of Jeep Throat, when because of the details as they came out, people were thinking, who's covering up for who here? And Chief Ignacio said, I have no information, even from the get-go, that there was a cover-up in this crash. 2 great pronouncements. We add a third one today. Earlier, the governor expressed confidence in Hattick, saying, I am confident that Jack did not intentionally mean anything contrary to the law and regulations of the commission. She added, we are transparent and accountable to the people. We are transparent with reports, meetings, and minutes. And as far as I'm concerned, we're following everything that we are required to do. It's right there. It's right there. It was on PNC News.
Quick, tell the vice speaker.
Yeah. We require everything we're required to do. So if you combine her with the chief, you've got a dynamite combination there. No cover-up from the get-go, and being transparent and accountable and doing everything that she's supposed to do and doing everything right.
Who is it? Schultz from Hogan's Heroes? I know nothing.
Sergeant Schultz. Sergeant Hogan, I see nothing. I hear nothing. I know nothing. Colonel Hogan. All right, so then today, Governor met with CLTC Chairman on Hattick. Governor Leanne Guerrero met with Chamorro Land Trust Commission Chairman John Regis Jr. on Monday regarding the commission's concerns with CLTC Administrative Director Jack Hattick. It was just last week, following an executive session, when Regis announced that the commission felt the administrative director was not suited for the position. He then stated the commission would be requesting to meet with the governor. At that time, Adelup stated there would be no comment until the governor met with the chairman to discuss the situation. Hattick remains as administrative director in the meantime. Leanne Guerrero stated Monday morning that no decision had been made yet on Hattick, and that she would be meeting with Regis in the afternoon, and then after that, if Regis badmouthed Hattick, she would want to meet with Angel Sablon to find out if Hattick is like a brother to Angel. The commission statement on Hattick comes after an incident in February in which a land agent claimed that Hattick coerced her into including an illegal land application swap in her report to the commission. Haddock stated he did not force her to make the changes, but said he added his own recommendations to the report. Nonetheless, the land agent statement caused concern among commissioners. They're not concerned about him adding to her report. That's okay. If you don't coerce anybody, you can do anything you want.
Well, what happens when you don't investigate and you just ask questions.
Regis then conducted an interview with staff and developed a report on the matter, which was discussed in closed session on Monday. It's unclear what led to the current stance on Haddock after the March meeting. Regis stated the commission had addressed issues at hand with the director, and there's an expectation that clarity, cooperation, and transparency need to be realized. However, there was some discussion about how much progress had been made with the priority listing during the public portion of the April meeting, just before Regis would make his announcement on Haddock. Senator Brown had also written to the governor requesting an investigation into Haddock, which Adelup has so far left unanswered. We are transparent and accountable to the people. We're transparent with reports, meetings, and minutes. And as far as I'm concerned, we're following everything that we're required to do, the governor said. She said she was very confident that the administrative director did not intentionally mean to say anything contrary to the laws or regulations or commission's instructions. She didn't intentionally mean to say it. He just wrote it down, which doesn't count. Those words never passed his lips.
It was a random occurrence.
Exactly. So I can't say enough about this whole Chamorro Land Trust Commission and what a clusterfumble it is, and what a clusterfumble it has been from the get-go. We still got over 4,000 people, including one of our callers who repeated his experience here yesterday, who went down and stood around in 1995 to get these leases. And very few leases have been let, and I suspect many of those, at least 106 of those, were null and void because the commission allowed people to swap places in line. Before the election, the commission was in the news every day, just one scandal after another scandal. Pika Fair, the chairman at that time, I guess part of being the chairman of the Land Trust Commission is that you can do investigations, and when you do your investigations, the first thing you do is go up to Home Depot and buy 5 gallons of whitewash to help you properly put your investigations together, because Pika Fair said, well, we did an investigation. Nobody did anything wrong. All these stories you read in the paper, she didn't use the word fake news, but that would be the only logical conclusion. Now we have a new administrative director. The governor split the Land Trust Commission out of the Department of Land Management. Land Trust Commission and the Ancestral Lands Commission had been under the wing of the director of the director of land management, which I thought was a pretty good idea, economy, etc. But then when the governor took over and started to bring dead agencies back to life and appointing people, she did the same thing with those two land elements, separated them from the director of land management, making positions for 2 new appointees, one of whom was Jack Haddock. And Haddock's term as the administrator of the Land Trust Commission has been a disaster from the get-go. Let's see, I got somebody in the green room. Oh, I thought maybe it was Jack Haddock, but no, it's Pete or repeat. Which is it?
It's Pete. Let me repeat. It's Pete.
Good afternoon, Pete.
Good afternoon, Uncle Bob. You know, I wanted to add and remind everyone of an important issue that early on happened with the Chamorro Land Trust Commission, there were unequal lots given out, meaning some folks were given acres and acres for residential lots, and others were given, different sizes for the arrendo, the agricultural lots. But, if they had given it out equally, there would have been more people that have gotten leases, because there are people that had gotten residential leases that were 2, 3, 5, sometimes 8 acres, which there was absolutely no reason for that. But that was, if your pari was the administrator at the time. So that's also another issue that, I guess they can't go back and fix those, because the leases are already been deemed valid and they're good until they expire.
Well, I think you're at least partially right, Pete. They can't go back. They can't go back. If they don't go back, then they never get to the question of what they can do about it. Because with the 106 void leases caused, the voidness being caused by this line swapping, so far they have not evicted anybody. So, and in fact, they just identified 106 in the last few days. So it takes them a long time to identify, and then once they find something, they're not going to do anything about it anyhow. So my analysis yesterday was, you might as well, Haddock was right when he tried to slide this last one past the commission, because if it works, fine, it works, and if it doesn't work, there's no downside risk to trying to do it wrong.
Yeah, but imagine how many people would have gotten lots already if they had just done it equitably to begin with.
Exactly.
And not give extra large lots to people they like.
Exactly.
So that's really one of the things that burns me about the whole fiasco.
So to me, Pete, the remedy is to go back and look at all those lots and give the people what the law would have required them to receive, not what they were able to finagle extra legally. And, without, just my horseback opinion, without spending any time on Westlaw, I suspect that, a grant that is violative of the law is void ab initio and probably can be reformed. Now, whether anybody has the political courage to do that, then that's where we keep coming back to the same place, the Angel Sablon phenomenon.
Then there's also the other issue of, I know there's a lot of lots that are sitting there vacant and unused, and they're not even enforcing their own rules that, if you don't do something with the land, then it's going to get taken back.
Exactly.
So, the purpose for this land trust was a good, noble one to get people, out of homelessness and have something that they can call their own. But the purpose, in my view, has been just entirely frustrated.
I can't say that you're wrong, Pete.
By incompetence and, so.
And some chicanery.
Yeah. All right, Uncle Bob. Thanks for letting me vent, as always.
All right. So it's good to hear you talk, Pete. So long. Yeah, let's see who else wants to chime in on this same subject here. June. Hey, I think June called yesterday. I think you called yesterday, June, and we didn't get to you on time.
Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to comment to what Pete was saying. There's people down there that are not doing what they're supposed to do with the property, and some of them are even violating EPA rules. I mean, they're bringing junk cars down there that are just sitting there and rotting away. The oil is just dripping into, we have a northern lens up there, an aquifer, and they're just ruining things, and no one's doing anything. They just let them stay there, and they're just not following up.
That's interesting.
I agree that everyone needs a place to stay, but, you just still don't just bring in a bunch of cars to the property and start looking like Harmon Industrial when that's not, I don't think that's allowed. And if you go to some areas, you see all the junk that they're just pulling there and no one's saying anything.
Well, this is pretty unsatisfactory, John. Maybe you agree with me that a real house cleaning needs to take place at the Chamorro Land Trust. That the board and the administrative director need to be given vacations, and they need to bring somebody in. And I use a rather graphic term. They need to bring someone in who will kick ass and take names. That's the only way it'll ever get straightened out.
So even from their admin side of things being cleaned up, they need to clean up a whole lot. It's a big mess.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's just my comment. Thank you.
Well, thanks for chiming in, Joan. Good talking to you. And let's see who else wants to chime in on this one here. Hasn't he already been on the Ferris wheel once? You're going to get altitude sickness, Carl, all of that height.
It's like a drug, Bob. Being on tall tales.
Yeah, for me too.
Before I get on to my main point, you're mentioning Steve so much. You're eventually either going to have to give him a commission, or you might even have to change the name of the show to Tall Steve or something, or Steve Tales.
The Tales of
He's
Steve.
taking over the show.
Yeah. True enough, our girl.
I wanted to ask you a question regarding, this CLTC thing. I remember a video I saw about Indian reservations, and part of it was, it drives through various reservations and just the really dilapidated condition the houses were in. I mean, it was really bad. Kind of reminds me of what we're seeing here. I personally think if they're going to give the land to people so they can use it as collateral for a loan to improve the property. One objection I've heard is, well, then they're just going to end up selling it and taking the money and wasting it and blowing it, and we're just going to end up, without Chamorros owning that, those plots of land. Do you see any way around this? I mean, is there?
Well, you're very close, I think, to the reason for the whole exercise, because we had a land for the landless program before the Chamorro Land Trust Act came along, and all of those statutes were abolished by the statute that created the Chamorro Land Trust and the Land Trust Commission. And the idea behind it was so that there will always be Chamorros owning dirt, real property on the island of Guam. 1975, remember? Well, you probably don't remember, but the Japanese were really riding high at that time. They were buying things like Pebble Beach Country Club and Ken Jones's house and on and on. And the theory was, if we're not careful, there won't be any Chamorros owning land on Guam at all. And we don't want that to happen. So Paul Bordallo, I'm guessing, took the statute that the Congress put in place in 1920, the Hawaiian Homelands Act, and adapted that for our situation so that these 99-year leases could be let so that the land would always be in the ownership of Chamorros. And when this came along, I thought it was a bad idea. And I never had to get into the Chamorros, whether we're talking about any form of invidious racial discrimination. I just start out with the proposition that our entire system is based on the Anglo-American theories of land tenure, something we got from the Brits, with all these strange, labels like fee simple title and real property, real R-E-A-L, like real in Spanish. And the whole theory behind the Anglo-American theory of land tenure is that under most circumstances, land should be freely alienable, because freely alienable land, real property, is the key to prosperity. If land is not freely alienable, you're not going to have a prosperous community. And you put your finger on it. So somebody's got a 99-year lease and wants to build on a piece of land that if he had fee title to it, might be worth $150,000. So with a piece of land that's worth $150,000, he could mortgage the land, get enough money to build a house that would be fitting on a $150,000 piece of property. But since he's got a 99-year lease, he isn't able to secure his note with a lease. Therefore, he can't build a kind of house that he would want to build on that land. So we're winding up creating, at best, low-rent housing areas, and talking about Indian reservations, kind of like driving through NAS, the old NAS, and see how that turned to junk. And my analysis is for the same reason, because the silly Navy didn't put those houses on surveyed lots. So I don't think even if you got one of those houses, I don't think you can get a mortgage on it because it's not mortgageable property. So the fact that people can't hypothecate that land really makes it of less value than what it ought to be of. And then, of course, there's this horrible bureaucracy that is screwed up from the get-go called the Chamorro Land Trust Commission. Even June told us about a new means of screwing up. So, Carl, I got to go to Wrigley Field for the seventh inning stretch, but thanks for making that point.
Okay, Bob, thanks for allowing me to ride a second time on the Ferris wheel.
All right.
I'm going to the back of the line. I'm going to start again.
I just don't swap places with anybody else.
Oh, I would never do that.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Today, this is Lieutenant Governor Josh Tenorio. You have an opportunity to make a difference, and it starts here at home. Cleanup projects, no matter the scale, help restore our island's beauty. Governor Liu and I invite our community to join us for the Guam Earth Month Island-wide Beautification Cleanup on Saturday, April 24th at 6 a.m. We all have a part in rebuilding a stronger, cleaner, greener Guam. Call 473-1162 for more details.
Field, Chicago, the seventh inning stretch. I mean, just two more innings left at Tall Tales today. And during the break, I peeked at Facebook again here, and I found out that Henry Manglona is in Barstow, Vegas, and environs, celebrating his 50th anniversary. 50th wedding anniversary. How about that? So it kind of reminds me when my wife and I celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary. And somebody said to me, I was in good spirits and probably having, well, no, I wasn't. It was good spirits, a little bit of a party, and somebody said, hey, Bob, did you learn anything? You've been married for 50 years. Did you learn anything in those 50 years? And I said, yeah, the first 50 are the hardest.
Yikes.
I hope that works for you, Henry. All right, so here we go after the seventh inning stretch. And the next item on the card is Protehe Latexan versus USMC. And during my show prep today, I ran across another interesting saying. It won't go on the great pronouncements list because that's only for local officials like Vanessa Williams, Steve Ignacio and our governor. But this is from a guy named Robert Lind, and I really like this. Robert Lind says, it's easier to believe a lie that one has heard 1,000 times than to believe a fact that one has never heard before. How true, how true. And I'll give you a classic example. The last election. And I don't think anyone who was paying attention could tell you with a straight face. I think this would even be tough for Ray Topaznia to say that there were no irregularities in that election. There is plenty of smoke there to think that even someone who was olfactorily challenged to think that where there's smoke, there's fire. But the big lie is this. What Trump said was a big lie. Every time you read about Trump and the election, the big lie, the insurrection was caused by the big lie. Well, there was no insurrection, and it wasn't a big lie. But you heard it so many times, over and over again. I had an example right here on the program where I quoted Robert Underwood as saying that Robert Underwood, in our own local statutes, the inalienable right to self-determination comes from the Treaty of Paris. And I read the Treaty of Paris, and all the Treaty of Paris says is that the Congress determines what the political status and citizenship of the people of the conquered territories will be. But people have heard the big lie so often that when they actually hear the facts, what the treaty says, something's wrong. I don't believe that. Everybody knows. We get into the everybody knows, right? Everybody knows that, the Chamorros are second-class citizens. Right up until the time that some idiot like me comes along and says, there are second-class citizens here. And it's a little bit arcane, but I'll explain it to you. If a person who is a citizen because he was born on Guam dies, his assets that are located on Guam or anywhere other than the 50 states are not subject to federal estate tax. Yeah. Now, the threshold is pretty high. There's something that most of us don't have to worry about. But you want to talk about class, that's second-class citizen. Now, if you were born in one of the 50 states and you have assets that are located in Guam or outside the 50 states, you still got to pay federal estate tax. That means that if you are born on Guam, you are a first-class citizen. If you were born in one of the 50 states, you are a second-class citizen as far as that little wrinkle in estate tax, federal estate tax is concerned. Nobody wants to hear that, we've been saying we've been second-class citizens, ever since I was in high school. So, I don't believe that thing about the estate tax. You can carry it a little bit further. Actually, people born in the 50 states are third-class citizens because you take people who were born on Guam or the Northern Marianas, they have that same estate tax wrinkle. But if you were born in the Northern Marianas and you happen to be of Northern Marianas descent, then you can have fee simple title to real property in the Northern Marianas. If not, if you're born in one of the 50 states or even on Guam, you can't own outright real property in the Northern Marianas. So we've got those folks from the Northern Marianas, then the folks from Guam, and then the folks in the 50 states, if you want to get into classes of citizens. But of course, this comes under it's easier to believe a lie that one has heard 1,000 times than believe a fact that one has never heard before. That's a suitable introduction to the next item on the card, which is, where did I put it here? Oh, yeah, here it is. Governor, meeting with Protehe Litexen. Very good. Protehe Litexen. Now, by way of background, you'll remember that Anamita Carr ran a nice story in the Daily News. A really great story. In fact, only problem with it was that it wasn't true. And Anamita told us that the UN Human Rights Council had commented on the administration of Guam, and this is what she said: as construction for the Marine Corps relocation continues, the latest project is underway for an aviation administration building. Members of the United Nations Human Rights Council expressed concerns about the growing military presence on Guam. That's what Anamita said. Wrong. It's just wrong. And I spent some time explaining to you that it wasn't the United Nations Human Rights Council. What had happened was that 3 rapporteurs, thank you, Pete, for the proper pronunciation of that term, had written a letter to somebody named Excellency, and obviously picked up all of the writing that Julian Uggan had created in his role as an anti-militarist, and then sent it back over their signatures. These rapporteurs are not members of the council, and I explained this also. I did a little research. There are sort of independent contractors that are chartered by parts of the United Nations to go out and do investigations and report back. But they would never do an investigation in any country without the permission of that country. So since the United States never gave them permission, this is really just, that's why I titled this Julian Uggan's Pen Pal. Julian writes a letter and says, hey, look at all this stuff. They do a really fast copy and paste, sign it, and send it back and say, hey, look at all this stuff. That's what happened. So they then sent that report, the Protehe Litexen folks sent that report to the governor, and they want to meet with the governor because they want her to take action now that the United Nations has gotten involved. Now, I got to stop here for a confession. I can't think of very many groups around the world that I have less respect for than the United Nations. It's everything that I don't want to see in something that holds itself out as a quasi-governmental agency, which would really kind of like to be the world government. So here's a story that ran in the Post. I got a feeling when Anamita gets around to writing it, it'll be a little different story. Governor, meeting with Protehe Litexen, very good. Governor Lulian Guerrero spoke positively about her meeting last week with representatives of Protehe Litexen. Save Retidian. Let's head for Churchill Downs, and then I'll come back and finish up with this one, Jose.
Hey, big news! Now you can listen to The Point on radio.com. And radio.com gives you so much more. Local news stations give you what's going on in your community, yet national news from CBS, CNN, or Fox News Radio. Take a break with one of the hundreds of music, sports, and talk stations. Love podcasts? Radio.com has thousands of true crime, comedy, kids and family podcasts, and more. Listen anytime, anywhere. On your PC, smart speakers, and a variety of connected devices. Or download the Radio.com app now from the App Store or Google Play.
Half a day, this is Lieutenant Governor Josh Tenorio. Earth Month is a global movement, and it starts here at home. From Jigo to Inalahan and everywhere in between, cleanup projects, no matter the scale, help restore our island's beauty. Let's reconnect with our island and join us for the Guam Earth Month island-wide beautification cleanup on Saturday, April 24th at 6 a.m. We all have a part in rebuilding a stronger, cleaner, greener Guam. Call 473-1162 for more details.
So here we are, Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky, heading down the home stretch here for another beautiful day on Tall Tales. It's so good to be back after that 2 days off over the weekend. So I'm reading again from the Post. Governor meeting with Protehe Letexen. Very good. Governor said the group will be working with her in some capacity on the issues three United Nations representatives raised recently in a letter to the federal government. Now, I'm not even sure about that, because the letter I saw was just addressed to Excellency. But I've done a FOIA to see what that letter looks like, and I've also done a FOIA to see what the papers that Julian Uggan sent off were, because those were both attached to the letter. There were attachments to the letter that Protehe gave to the governor. I probably wish they wouldn't have, because I'm going to be able to see their notes. The UN representatives advocate for the rights of indigenous peoples, environmental issues, and human rights. Quote, I met with the Letexen leaders. I think it was Friday. Tells you how important it was to the governor. Let's match these things together. Governor, meeting with Protehe Letexen, very good. I met with the Letexen leaders. I think it was Friday. It's what's called top-of-the-mind awareness. It was a very good meeting, and we have strategized on what our actions are going to be moving forward. And they are going to be working with me in some of the decisions that we made, that we would be able to work with the United Nations, Leon Guerrero said Monday. Do I envision a trip to New York, working with the United Nations? Remember when Raging Lee and Senator Nelson tried to do that one, and Ken Leon Guerrero blew the whistle on them? We would be able to work with the United Nations. Crystal Paco San Augustine, formerly known as Crystal Paco, said the governor stated she intends to meet with military officials regarding environmental impacts from the military buildup, and is committed to working with Protehe Letexen moving forward in response to the letter. Well, she's been meeting with military officials, as Steve would say, since the get-go. And remember, with the whole flap over that Nelsonis tree, the tree that was supposed to be dying and was the only one left in civilization, and the whole firing range had to stop in order to save it. But then when a little research was done, we find out that the Air Force, working with the university, actually saved it, and had it not been for the Air Force, it would have been dead long ago. And it wasn't in any danger, and that seedlings from that tree were planted in other places in order to preserve it. I guess we kind of forgot that. But that was the governor working with the military on that one. And then, of course, we've got the governor working with the military through one of the highest positions in the government of Guam. We have a governor, we have a lieutenant governor, we have a speaker of the legislature over at the legislature, we've got a Washington rep. These are all part of the Manakilo Gobyerno na lo te mastakilo sa imastakilo e shepo. The SHPO is the highest official of all. Even the governor has to dance to the SHPO's tune. So the SHPO speaks for the governor, and the SHPO steps in and does the job very well, because notwithstanding the governor's "we are transparent and accountable to the people," the SHPO won't release any information on any of this stuff, even though we're led to believe that the military left it up to her. So the SHPO won't do any of this stuff until the governor comes along and gives her a direct order. But the governor's been talking with the military. Okay, so that sentence again, and they're going to be working with me, they being protehylitexin. Now, we always see protehylitexin, and it's anthropomorphized like so many other things. We don't know who that is. Is that a person? Should I address that person as Mr. Protehy or Mr. Litexin? Probably just they, because there's never a spokesman for protehylitexin. They're always hiding behind this facade of this perhaps gigantic organization with hundreds of members. We don't know, but it's protehylitexin.
How about the Texan?
The Texan. There you go. Yeah. So, as I mentioned, Crystal Paco San Augustine said the governor stated she intends to meet with military officials regarding environmental impacts from the military buildup and is committed to working with protehylitexin moving forward in response to the UN letter. So what are you going to do? Write back to the 3 rapporteurs? No. The group sent a letter to the governor in early April requesting to discuss the UN representative's letter, and that was April 1st. That was covered in the paper. So in response to an April 1st letter, 20 days later, the governor says, I met with the Litexin leaders, I think it was Friday. You can tell the governor's really hepped up on this one, right? And then we respectfully beseech your leadership. Now, that's a usage I'm not familiar with. I know you could beseech a person. I beseech you, set my people free. But I don't know that you can beseech a personality trait or activity. I think you could perhaps invoke it or prompt it or try to enlist it. But this is what Protehy says. We respectfully beseech your leadership in engaging with the Department of Defense and Joint Region Marianas to pause all activities and sites of impact in order to prevent further devastating impacts to our lands and waters and the defilement of our ancestors. Now, when it comes to the defilement of their ancestors, they shouldn't be talking with the Department of Defense and Joint Region Marianas. They should be talking to Carlotta Leon Guerrero, because after all, she is the SHPO. The 3 UN representatives wrote to Biden in late January. I don't believe that part. I'm from Missouri here. I have not seen a letter to Biden stating in part, notably, the Chamorro people have not provided their free, fair, and informed consent in connection with the ongoing expansion of U.S. military bases and accompanying increase in personnel of Guam. Now, I've talked about this before too many times, but it's so silly that I can't resist talking about it again. How would the Chamorro people give their free, prior, and informed consent in connection with ongoing expansion of U.S. military bases? It just doesn't follow.
The only way would be through representatives and leadership on Guam, which we do through voting, which would be Lou Leon Guerrero, which already happened.
But according to the people over on that side, you got to watch out for the colonists. the colonizer. And who created this government? The colonizer.
So the governor is not recognized as a leader of Guam?
But not of the Chamorro people.
Oh, got
How
it.
could she be a leader of the Chamorro people when she's in the pocket of the colonizer?
So why are they meeting with the governor then?
That's a good question. So many imponderables here, right? Yeah.
It's just amazing.
Yeah. So, and there's no People's Council of the Chamorro, of Tautau Chamorro. There's no Enetnan Tautau Chamorro, that could hold itself out as having the ability to consent or object on the part of the Chamorro people and give that free, prior, and informed consent or lack of consent. So if these are the reporters, they don't know what they're doing. They just plain don't know what they're doing. And I suspect the reason they don't know what they're doing is because they don't know what they're doing. And they're just following the text that Julian Uggins submitted to them. And he thought, this really sounds good. They're not paying any attention to the Chamorro people. They're just listening to the government of Guam. Wait a minute. Did I say that? Yeah. The military escalation, and this is more on the quote, the military escalation risks increased contamination to the drinking water, loss of wildlife. Yeah, because the military is going around shooting all the wild pigs that are tearing the place apart. And biodiversity, irreversible damage of their lands, territories, and resources. Irreversible damage to the land, traditional lands. Loss of traditional livelihoods. Traditional livelihoods like, I can't think of any. So, it's kind of like you want to make these arguments that would work really well if we're talking about the pre-Spanish days when many of the people on Guam were what are called hunter-gatherers. I don't think anybody wants to be a hunter-gatherer anymore. Unless you're one of those, like the guy out here in the street that we see every day. Loss of traditional livelihoods, cultural sites, and heritage, and threatens the physical and cultural survival of the Chamorro. Now, I don't remember exactly the details, but when the United States naval occupation began around the turn of the last century, we were down to less than 3,000 Chamorros. And the major reason was because the drinking water contained parasites. So the naval government cleaned up the water, and the population increased dramatically after that because there was clean water to drink. Now, I don't know if the naval government did that out of some spirit of disinterested generosity, cultural preservation. I submit it really doesn't make a whole lot of difference because once the water was cleaned up, Chamorros survived a whole lot longer.
They were woke.
Yeah. And this article says the 3 UN representatives wrote to President Joseph Biden in late January. And then the 3 rapporteurs input on several topics and urged the United States to take interim measures to halt alleged violations until the reply is submitted. Well, another really questionable idea. These 3 rapporteurs, as I've explained, are basically independent contractors to the United Nations what's it called? Human Rights Council. And they don't have the diplomatic clout to ask the president to do anything. So I guess we've wrapped that up. I hear the music in the background, so let's call it a day. We'll be back tomorrow at 1600. We'll see you then for Taller Tales.
Living vice president. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. But Walter Mondale has died.
In reacting to the news of his vice president's death, former President Jimmy Carter said, Fritz Mondale provided us all with a model for public service and private behavior. Carter had chosen then Senator Mondale to help him in his run against former President Ford. The two won, but Mondale said as VP, he was going to work.
I was not interested in a ceremonial job. I wanted to be a part of things, supporting the president.
He made his own run for the White House in 1984 and became the first major party nominee to choose a female running mate, Geraldine Ferraro. But he lost to then-President Reagan. He went on to serve as President Clinton's ambassador to Japan and helped avert a trade war over cars.
Fox's Jill Nato. Walter Mondale was 93. The Jerry and Derek Chauvin's murder trial will resume their deliberations in a few hours, sequestered for the night after getting the case late yesterday.
Deciding questions of fact is your exclusive responsibility. In doing so, you must consider all the evidence you have heard and seen in this trial, and you must disregard anything that you may have heard or seen elsewhere about this case.
Judge Peter Cahill instructing the jury. He later denied a defense request for a mistrial, but acknowledged he thought comments made to protesters by Congresswoman Maxine Waters were inappropriate and could form the basis for an appeal. Former President Trump, in his first on-camera interview since leaving the White House, telling Fox's Hannity Republicans can make a comeback if they embrace the MAGA doctrine.
You're going to see something that will start to take place in 22 and will culminate in 24, and you're going to see a lot of big things and great things for the Republican Party and for the country.
Mr. Trump saying had he not campaigned for Senate Republicans, the GOP would have lost 8 seats. America is listening to Fox News.
Jason in the House, the Jason Chaffetz podcast. There is always someone